welcome to the next fan face-off. It's been a while, and some small changes have occurred since our last edition of this little chess bit here. So the fan face-off series is growing into something that doesn't just culminate in an invitational event. It's going to become a running thing, and as people continue to qualify, they will be invited to various on-stream events. We recently had an arena format invitational in which Russian Bias and August der Stark both won Coach Robert Murch, and congratulations to them. And so I'm looking forward to hosting more events for you guys that are like this one. And so let's go to look at the players. Welcome, Triangle Cool Guy. Today we have RawrOnion versus badswagtime, and so here's the profile for RawrOnion. RawrOnion is 1679 FIDE, which doesn't mean anything for us on this stream. The things that we care about are these blitz and rapid ratings that you can see here on the left. RawrOnion has provisional ratings for these because you can tell it from the question mark next to the rating. And they're based on a relatively small number of games. But they've been playing on this profile since 2018, and they spent almost 10 days working on their chess here. So if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see this is the puzzle score, 2397 over 1,000 something puzzles. So the impression that I get just looking at the statistics here is that RawrOnion is someone who plays longer time controls, and probably spends more time studying chess than actually playing. This is in sharp contrast with badswagtime, who we have here, who has been playing only since 2021 on this profile, but not only are their ratings not provisional, but they also have quite a few games in bullet and blitz and a small number of rapid games in contrast with RawrOnion. And this is their puzzle situation, 2276. If we flick back and forth here, you can see that RawrOnion has a slightly higher puzzle score. So badswagtime, probably not studying that much chess, but is very active and therefore probably quite sharp. And their ratings are relatively close in the blitz and rapid categories that we care about for making pairings in the fan face-offs. But they are different in their other categories, such as in bullet chess, where I think that badswagtime has many more games, so they have more experience. And while their rating is lower in bullet, they do have a more significant rating. So because of the provisionality of the ratings for RawrOnion, they're a little bit of a loose cannon. We're not sure exactly what strength they are, but they did qualify for a match with badswagtime. So they could be much stronger or much lower, and possibly only in the blitz or only in the rapid. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, and I look forward to streaming the games for you guys. So let's see what the players are up to. I think Alright, so the players are, as far as I can tell, ready. Let's see. Let me just fix this up real quick. Make it look better. Sometimes OBS likes to play a guessing game with me about what window I want it to look at. Alright, 1 second. Make this a little bit better. The players will begin in just a moment. Alright, so we're starting with 2 games of 10 plus 0, followed by 2 games of 5 plus 0, and if necessary there will be an Armageddon tiebreak, and whoever wins qualifies for the next Fan Fight Invitational event. Alright, so I expect the players to begin pretty soon. Let's see. And of course we will have a post-mortem with the players after all of the games are finished. Alright, they're probably just connecting to the stream as well to make sure that everything's set up properly. Just messaging them to make sure they're good to go. Badswagtime has white first in this game, and both players are online, so that's good. Alright, and we have e4 from badswagtime after a dramatic pause. At the start of the game, RawrOnion has a little bit of time to deliberate their first move, but expect them to already have that prepared. Let's see what they think against e4. I'm expecting something like Scandinavian or maybe French or Caro-Kann, something that's a little bit more avoidant of the main lines, since that's sort of a trend these days. Hopefully this doesn't abort. There we go. And it's e6 with a French. Well, maybe French. They haven't played d5 yet, so really anything could happen here. So exchange French, which is famous for being possibly the most boring kind of French. But I think it's a little bit more normal to play c3 at some point instead of knight c3. So that could lead to some excitement, potentially. Or we'll just see them both finish their development out of the opening, you know, no problems with a more protracted struggle in the middle game or the end game. Rich, welcome. They're definitely taking their time in this tempo 0 portion. Normally people like blitz out the first 10 moves and then we see some waiting. So if the players aren't that well prepared for each other's opening prep, there could be a lot of variance in the outcome of the opening across 4 games. It's a relatively small match format, so 2 games is not a lot of time to really get accustomed to your opponent's choices for white and black. Alright, so bishop d2 is breaking this pin, and knight e7 is finishing development for black. They also had options to play these other knight moves. Knight h6 is maybe a little unintuitive because it's away from the center. Knight f6 is probably considered more standard. So knight e7 is an interesting choice. Knight f3 is sort of taking the classic route. We want to develop the knight to control the center and try to castle quickly, so logical play. I think it would be even more logical for white to have played knight e2 here because they haven't gotten this bishop out yet. For black, knight e7 makes a lot more sense once bishop b4 is in play. In 10+0, an advantage in time of like 1 minute at this stage is not that substantial in my opinion, but later on in the game a 1 minute lead could become really important because the tendency to blunder in a time control with no increment increases as you get closer to 0, of course. So if black doesn't catch up on time, they could end up in time pressure a little bit later in the game. Of course, it's important more so to play quality moves in the opening, I would say. So the opening is definitely a good place to spend time if you're going to. So white is just developing their minor pieces in a more or less normal way. Black is pinning the knights as much as they can. White is just breaking those pins. And now h5 is an interesting move. Often when people are moving the pawns on the side of the board so early, they're declaring an intention not to castle. At least not on that side. But a single pawn move on the king side doesn't ruin your entire chance to castle. It's just a hint, possibly, at things to come. Yeah, definitely solid play here, Rich. And now h3, asking a question to the bishop. Does the bishop want to give its life for the knight on f3, or go back and find some other home? And here's our answer, bishop e6. Some would say that a bishop on e6 is not that well placed because it's blocked by its own pawns, but it also extends its control through the d pawn to the c4 square, so it could restrain white's attempts to break on the queen side, potentially. It would at least make it require a lot more work. So the bishop's not totally passive there, and it still has all of its control of the king side that it had previously. I think that criticism of a bishop on a square like e6 usually becomes more relevant as pawns become fixed on the light square. So pawn structure is still very flexible. You can make some similar criticism perhaps of the bishop on e2 that is blocked by pieces rather than pawns, but that is also something that could easily change. So white castled kingside, and you might think that this is castling into an attack because of the move h5, but the pieces haven't really begun to fly in there yet, so if black does decide to attack on the king side, h5 move will help them, but they still have a lot of preparing to do. White could do something in the meanwhile. Usually people say exchange variation is very boring because it's super symmetrical, but here it seems that both players have chosen to develop their pieces in very not symmetrical kinds of ways. Knight on e7 versus knight on f3, bishop on b4 and e6 versus bishops on d2 and e2. The thing that's most symmetrical in this position is the knight on c6 and the knight on c3 pressuring the d-pawns. Alright, white is taking control of the e-file, which is open. Sometimes people get confused about the notion of the open file when there are pieces on it, but when we say open file, we mean that there are no pawns blocking the way. f6, interesting decision. Some famous people might say never move the f-pawn. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about. But there's a time for everything. And black has recouped some of their lost time. White has a very modest time advantage at this point. And a3, questioning the bishop. I think it's kind of like when one shoe drops, you expect to hear the next shoe, right? h3 is questioning the bishop on g4. Now a3 is questioning the bishop on b4. And black has made a consistent decision, retreating both bishops. This could probably be explained by a desire to maintain the bishop pair for later. Since the pawn structure isn't fixed, the potentiality that the position opens up and makes the bishop pair a very important feature is still present. So it's pretty logical. Bishop b4 is establishing a pin on the knight on c6, and queen d7 is guarding not just the knight but also all of the minor pieces around. White's thinking a little bit more than before here, probably because the development is more or less complete and some specific plans need to be made around this point. Queen e2, putting pressure on the center. Or just declaring a winning plan. Just be careful about declaring what those winning plans might be, because the players might be watching the chat. But yeah, white does seem to have a rather pleasant position. The last two moves, they've developed their bishop to b5, pinning the knight, and established their queen on e2 with pressure along the e-file. That seems pretty snazzy, if you ask me. Also, it's worth mentioning how black has moved the same pieces repeatedly in the opening in a way that is not true for white. And here some tactical things are happening. Castling, perhaps in a panic, because knight takes d5, capturing a piece, if you can't capture back, it could be seen as a bad sign. Some might say. It's at least something to sweat about, if not something that you could solve. No. Swagtime is the one who's down on time, but they've invested their time in order to gain one pawn, and possibly more now that knight takes e7 is check to the black king. Of course, black could take the knight. They basically have two options: take the knight or move the king. Worth mentioning that knights are unblockable at this moment. If you could insert a piece of paper maybe in the way, that would help, but none of the pieces move like that. Knights sure are pesky. Sometimes people establish their knights in this formation, where one protects the other, thinking that it's like solid or good because one is supporting the other, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. So queen takes e7. Recovering the lost piece, but not the pawn. So white has escaped with an extra pawn, at least thus far, and black might be hoping to obtain some compensation somehow. Amazing actor is giving commentary on light chess. Let me tell him. Nobody can see his chat, so I'm just telling him that he can come over here. Bishop takes c6, possibly a precise move. The knight was guarding the queen, so getting rid of it seems logical, but black also has options for how to respond. Queen takes e2, and bishop takes b7 is an in-between move. Instead of recovering the queen immediately and allowing black to play b takes c6, white is cashing in for a pawn. So things are pretty even, aside from the difference of a pawn now that bishop takes c2 has been played, recovering one lost pawn. It's still a tight game, especially since now more than half of the time is gone, and there's a small time advantage of almost a minute for black. In these faster time controls, having the additional time often makes direct compensation for the material lost. Vedant, welcome. I was sad that you came back so quickly from your tournament game, but also glad that you're here. d5 is an interesting move. The pawn presents itself as a target to the bishop on b3, but white is free to use their pieces, at least on this move. Right now they just started, so you're pretty much right in time. Mahir, welcome. Mahir, you really got to get your own YouTube account. Alright, knight d4. After a long think. At least for this time control, a long think. So bishop takes d5 is recovering that pawn again. So in the last like what, 6 minutes, they've white has won 2 pawns and then lost again 2 pawns for a position with just maybe slightly more active pieces. Maybe it looks pretty even, although the pawn structure on the queen side is slightly asymmetrical. That could be a factor that plays in the endgame, as you know, we've also traded many pieces, so it's definitely an endgame scenario. Vedant is rooting for RawrOnion so that he can win and join the invitationals. Well, even if he doesn't win this match, he still has every opportunity to challenge someone again, especially since I believe Rich is interested in playing a match, and they are within 150 rating points of each other. And anybody who's watching who's interested in joining a fan fight and having commentary on their games, you guys can always join the Discord. I can generate a link right here and share it to the chat. You can always join that Discord and express interest and get someone to challenge you, or challenge someone yourself. The official rules are on the live chess page for the fan face-offs. Are Vedant and Mahir finally within rating of each other? I think that last time we had this discussion, Mahir's light chess rating was like 300 or 400 points below, something like that. So black is maybe attempting to break through on the king side with g4, but white is declining, politely declining with h4. Now bishop e5, putting a little bit of pressure on the white minor pieces. I have a feeling this one's going to come down to a time scramble because both players are really taking their time for sure. Knight f5, occupying what could be construed as an outpost square just because it's sheltered from attacks by the rooks. You guys gotta be nicer to Hari, beating him over and over again to get to 2200 on light chess. Rude. Bishop e6, continuing to disturb the knight. So there's a real decision to be made here about how this knight is going to extricate itself from danger. Knight g3. I would say that white is risking it for the biscuit. Black has played rook d5, using all of their pieces. That's nice. Always recommendable to do that. Now rook c2. I think that white and black have the same idea, doubling their rooks on one of the open or half open files. With the open file, the black rooks have free reign over all of the squares on that file. But for white, they're mainly putting pressure on the c pawn. So the black rooks are more flexible. They could maybe invade some of the ranks downwind, but white at least has a concrete target. Okay, one pair of rooks are off. Probably to try to meet the idea of rook takes c1, rook takes c1, and bishop takes b2 with an attack on the rook and the pawn. Vedant, what are you playing where you have so many games in a row? And I think a blunder here and some slight time pressure from white. They blundered the rook on c4. Maybe a mouse slip. Yeah, we'll have to ask them afterwards because we're going to go right into the next 10+0 afterwards. Difficult situation. Just waiting for the end. And there's checkmate. So RawrOnion managed to pull this one off. Now badswagtime has black. And RawrOnion is opening with e4. So now they're playing quickly in the opening. This is Scotch game, and definitely Scotch game, not Scotch Gambit, because they did not offer a pawn with bishop c4. I think this is one of the main lines for the Scotch, although I'm not an expert on it. Alright, later Vedant. Good luck with your game. Queen e2 is an interesting choice. It's blocking the bishop on f1, so either they're going to have to move their queen again to develop the bishop, or they'll develop it along the other diagonal with a move like g3. Or maybe g4, to some g-pawn move. So when queen e2 is in play, it's sort of insinuating that white might want to castle queenside. Castling queenside is generally slower than castling kingside because of this extra queen move, but if you can do it with tempo, or just put it on a useful square, there's nothing wrong with attempting to castle queenside. In fact, I think castling queenside sometimes confers certain endgame benefits because your king is slightly closer to the center than when it is on g1. On the other hand, white will often have to spend an extra move playing king b1 in order to avoid any danger to their king. f3 is a maybe patient-looking move because it's foregoing the development of a piece temporarily in order to consolidate the e-pawn, but black is getting pressure with d5. d4 is a double attack on the bishop and the knight. So white's playing very quickly to get into this position. It'll be interesting to see what they might have cooked up for this potentiality of having the minor pieces all under attack. Playing slow now. Interesting. And bishop g5. I think white had lots of options there because, as we'll probably see, black is likely not going to take on c3, as it is. The reason being, of course, that the d-pawn is pinned to the queen. So here we have bishop d7 breaking the pin. Now it's a real threat to take the knight. Unless, of course, white installs, in this case, a move knight d5. But there are other options too. This is probably the strongest one. Pressuring the knight on f6. So again, badswagtime is getting into a little bit of time pressure. But it's still quite early in the game, so as long as he can navigate this situation and catch up on time, that probably won't matter. More urgent probably is this pressure on f6. It's sort of a classic attacking pattern to pin the knight on f6 and pressure with a minor piece. Rook e6 supports that minor piece. White also had the option to take with the bishop, but oh, this is an interesting decision. He's sacrificing a whole exchange potentially. G takes f6 would have been a little bit more expected. Like, it would mess up the pawn structure around the king, sure, but they wouldn't be technically at a loss for any material. So here, black is definitely offering something to white, either as a piece offering or maybe because he expects to maintain a better position without the exchange than if he still had it. Needless to say, white probably wasn't expecting this because they're taking a lot of time on this move. Thank you for the follow, Rohan. Now, e5 is putting pressure on the pin piece yet again, because capturing with the rook on f6, if they play bishop takes f6, it's probably a little bit clear what kind of compensation there is for black. Like, they maintain the pawn on d4, they get their development done, white still has to untangle their bishop on f1. But in this case, black still has some questions to answer. This doesn't mean that there won't be any compensation. There's always some compensation when you're sacrificing something, at least unless your position is like so horrible. Usually there's some kind of compensation. Okay, here comes h6. Interesting decision. disturbing the bishop on g5. It could be Rohan. We're being a little bit non-specific because the players can actually be in the chat. But, you know, it's interesting to think about what might happen if they take this rook, for example. Black does seem to be in more pressure than white. Black has recouped a little bit of their time deficit. But only a little bit. I don't know if it would be worth, for example, an exchange in this position. With 6 minutes to go, I expect that a material advantage should be pretty substantial. But, of course, it depends on the player. Taking with the pawn, I would say, is maybe the greedy approach. If they took with the bishop, Black would still be forced to take with the pawn. But there are probably merits to capturing in this way as well. Sometimes when there's a pawn directly in front of the king, they call it an umbrella pawn because it shelters the black king from frontal attacks. And so it's quite typical whenever a pawn arrives there to see that the pawn continues to live for a few more moves because it's anyway usually gone. But not always. So queen f6 is a sort of standard move, what you might expect with a pawn on g7. A white pawn anyway. Now I'm wondering if we'll see white's point in their move order choice because for a few moves they could have taken on f6 with a bishop and they ultimately refused to do so. Yeah, black does have the bishop pair, so they could stage a comeback on that basis alone. Bishop pair can really be nice, sometimes compensating for an exchange or a pawn or two pawns. It's hard to say what the best move was because there probably are merits for white's choice here. I think that bishop takes f6 is also a really good option because we would arrive in a very similar situation with a different pawn structure. Mahir on YouTube is criticizing the Scotch Gambit, which white had the option to take earlier in the game but didn't. This is a regular Scotch game. King b1 is a prophylactic move, avoiding checks, for example, on the h6 to c1 diagonal. But it's also a move that doesn't develop any pieces. Mahir states that he would have more fun playing black. Yeah, sometimes it's nice to be down material, even if your position is dubious, because it's still, like, the onus to make proof is on white. So here's rook e8. I expect to see a couple fast moves here from black because they just took over the initiative at the price of some material. So probably the next few moves will be somewhat clear. White has to make a couple of the harder decisions. The pawn on d4 was originally not... it was slated for destruction, I should say, but because of this exchange sacrifice, black has managed to consolidate that pawn at the very least. And having a pawn on d4, it's a pretty strong pawn. So queen c4 is white's choice. Probably on its way somewhere else. I don't see the queen maintaining its presence on c4. And RawrOnion burned a lot of time to reach this position up some material. They went from a time advantage to over a minute time disadvantage, although swagtime's also giving some thought here. Yeah, Rohan, I hope that you enjoy learning some more chess. You could actually join our Discord if you're interested, because we do have people who are learning together in the server. You can definitely join us anytime. Yeatermaster, are you playing the quads too? Yeatermaster says that he won his game just now on YouTube. Yeah, you're welcome to join us, Rohan. I'll give you talk privileges once you're there. this up. All right, so knight e5, and the queen goes back to e2. Sort of suspicious when you are forced on the next move to return to the very square you came from. It's kind of like, I have a problem here, I go somewhere else, I go back to my first problem. Very interesting. Utermaster, what tournament is in Maryland that you're playing? Is it one of the like Cherry Blossom tournaments or something? Or maybe DC International? Okay, black still has a small time advantage and maybe some compensation for the exchange. Bishop f5 is a logical move, just improving this bishop. The pawn on g7 is still not able to be saved, so we can consider that sort of a gone pawn. This is the third queen move in a row for white, hoping to extricate themselves from the difficulties, I suppose. And d3, opening up the position. I'm curious to see how this is going to be followed up. Alright, good luck in your Washington International, Utermaster. Bishop takes d3, developing the last minor piece. Now the bishop is under pressure. So we might be seeing even more queen moves in this position. Queen e2 again. I don't know why this queen is in love with e2, but it continues to go there and back. Always running back to e2. e2 was always there through all of white's troubles. How could they ever leave e2's side? Anyway, maybe they're finally there to stay. The reason that they were moving from e2 before was probably because of the rook on e8 that was disturbing the queen. And now the rook is not there, so maybe e2 is finally a happy home for the queen on white's side. Of course, at the end of the match, we're going to discuss everything. There were other possibilities. And we're going to invite the players to talk 2 games from now, or maybe 3 if it's tied. And we'll see what they were thinking and what the other options were. Knight takes d3, quick as you like. Eliminating the light square bishop. So now the bishop on f5 is going to become stronger, I expect. At the same time, there's always this nagging absence of a rook for black. White is always going to have one more rook than black. Unless something dramatic happens. As tends to occur in the fan face-offs, sometimes some really strange things happen. Especially in badswagtime games. The position takes on an irrational character and then funny things just happen. So queen d6 is continuing to bully the light squares. Although it occupies the dark square, that's a nice thing about queens. They can do it all. Bishop d4, hinting at some dark square operations on the queen's side, and also obstructing this d pawn. h4 is a move that I expected to see a long time ago. I actually forewent discussing it this entire time because it was on the cards. But from the moment that white played bishop g5 and then knight takes f6 and rook takes f6, there was this potentiality for opening the king side and starting a new front for attack. So now we see maybe a turn in the tide. Because with h4 and g4 in play, even though white has tripled pawns on the king side, which has probably never happened in the fan face-off history, this does introduce some chances. Okay, now queen b6, more or less saying I don't care what happens on the king side. Knight b3, guarding the queen side, and maybe poking the bishop on d4. So the bishop saves itself and finally eliminates that miserable pawn. Yeah, probably the pawns will be marching Rohan. We'll see. For both sides, this will probably come down to a pretty tight race of some sort, if I had to ask. Or if I had to guess, I mean. Queen e7 invading black's position, with threats to the rook. Rook takes d3. I don't see no ghosts is the response. Queen e8 check. Looks like a precise sort of move. Now after queen takes f7 check, they have only one move, which is king h8. Again, only move bishop g8. It's a dire situation. Now rook takes d3, capturing a free piece. Black is barely hanging on here with just the queen and the bishop. Now after queen f6, looks like the queens are coming off the board. And black is just a single bishop. Oof. Very difficult situation here. Yeah, probably a good game. Let's see. It's still not impossible to mess it up with a little bit of time pressure. As long as black plays their only moves swiftly. But mate on the board. Had to happen. Yeah, rough ending here for bad swag time. Now the players are going to switch to a 5+0 format. Let me just make sure the players are doing okay. I think I lost the players for a second. Alright, there we are. So now we're in the 5+0 format. And if Swag Time can win 2 games in a row, he'll maintain an even score and go to the Armageddon. Yeah, that was a pretty quick ladder mate. So we have a repeat of the opening from the last game already, because it was just random colors for the start of the 5-minute portion. So let's see if we see any modifications from either of the players. So now the knight's on e7. And queen e2, same kind of deal as before. Just trying to use some check commands here. Alright, we have a very similar scenario, except here the knight is not on f6, it's now on g6. So we won't be seeing the same bishop g5 and knight d5 motif, for sure. White is castling long, just finishing development. Black, I expect to finish their development slightly more easily than white, because the queen on e2 is blocking this bishop on f1. But that also depends on what white wants to do with this bishop. g3 is probably declaring a certain plan for that bishop. To not go to e2, d3, c4, b5, or whatever, but to either g2 or h3. Now f4 is coming in hot with some threats to the king side. Black is liquidating before f5 can even happen with bishop takes b3, which fractures the pawn structure slightly on the queen side. Occasionally, pawn structures like this are exploited during an attack, but they're also quite solid, difficult to attack in other situations. So I expect to see a little bit of calculation here from Swag Time. Knight b4 going on the attack using the outpost square. h4, commencing with the attack on the king side. So again, it's kind of a race, but in this situation, black is not down any material, so they probably aren't as obligated to go on the defensive as much as in the last game. h5, disturbing the knight. Knight e7 is almost the only square. They also had knight h8 to avoid being captured, but knight e7 has more of a hopeful future there. Not that h8 is always bad, but this is more of an intuitive choice. So white is continuing to play on the king side with the pawns and foregoing development of the bishop on f1 entirely. Swag time has a slight time pressure. d5 is a very aggressive choice, creating some threats in the center. Previously, all the play seemed to be focused on the flanks, so it's an interesting, maybe way of diverting white's kingside initiative by playing in the middle of the board. f6, so ignoring the center play. Knight c8 is a very interesting move. It might have been more intuitive to play something like knight c6, but that doesn't mean that knight to c8 is incorrect. It looks like the knight is not going to stay there, but it'll be headed to one of the squares, probably on the 6th rank soon. Now we have e5 and d4. White is continuing a more or less single-minded attack on the king side, which has yet to crystallize into a tactic per se, but the king side has definitely improved for white over the course of several moves. Queen e8, stepping out of the pin. This is a recurring motif in the games today, that a pawn that reaches the 4th rank, even if it's attacking several pieces, if it's pinned by the rook, it's not going to be able to capture anything immediately. So now queen g4 was coming with the threat of mate on g7, so g6 is more or less forced. Now something is brewing on the king side, something concrete. The knight rescues itself with knight e4. Pawn takes c3 was actually a threat there. White has really a lot of space on the king side because of these far advanced pawns. The knight looks pretty good on d5, sheltered by the pawn on d4, and with a potential future. Also, possibly preparing to capture some pieces. Bishop c4 is asking the knight the question, what do you really plan to do with your future? So, destroying the bishop. A downside of this exchange is that the knight on d5 was very active compared to the bishop on f4, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. Bishop d8 looking like a full defensive. Pawn takes g6 and probably f takes g6 would have been more desirable, but with a bishop on c4, this move is not possible. It's a very difficult situation, and I think badswagtime realized that immediately. Yeah, here's another checkmate. Now this is the final game, with 3 points in the first 3 games. It's already decisive, but we like to play the last game at least for the good memes. So here's another French. Not as long of a thoughtful period here for black with knight f6. In the first game, they spent really a lot of time on the first like 7 moves. I guess they know what to expect from each other. Bishop e2 is heading off bishop g4. In the first game, bishop g4 had to be responded to with bishop e2. And this time black didn't go for bishop b4, they went for bishop d6. Slightly different. So the bishop's still heading to g4. Also in the first game, black played h5. This time they've castled. So it's going to be a very different game. Bishop g5 came with the threat of knight takes d5. So black just supported that. And now with knight e5, a lot of minor piece exchanges have been offered. So the bishops come off, and white gets a developing move in the process with queen e2. h6 and bishop h4. White wants to maintain the pin, which makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty good pin. g5 is a very aggressive move, which potentially compromises black's kingside. In this case, it's 2 pawn moves, so this is maybe a more substantial investment of the kingside pawn structure compared to playing h5 in the first game. And white is actually much up on time compared to all the other games. Badswagtime was usually either ahead by a minute or behind by a minute throughout, but now it's like more than a minute and a half lead. Or becoming more than a minute and a half. So knight d7, very logical move, because the knight on b8 was the last minor piece that needed development. And f4, striking at the king side, is also very logical. Since white has already developed all of their pieces, they can consider such things. Playing almost instantly, really. This is part of the 5-minute portion, and badswagtime has only used 33 seconds for the whole game. Queen e7, pinning the knight on e5, but only a little bit. Rook ae1 is activating the last rook. The rook on f1 was activated by the f4 and f takes g5 sequence. So it's nice when you can activate a piece by moving other pieces. No need to actually change the position of that rook. But the rook on a1, on the other hand, it would take a lot longer to utilize it with like a4, a5, a6. So this is very logical. So black copies them. Same idea. Queen f3 is shifting the focus of attention, getting out of the pin. And of course, after this game, we're going to go to a post-mortem with the players. We'll have a little bit of a discussion, as long as they're still up for it. Oops. So in the last couple of moves, we had takes, takes, and check, which I think arguably improves white's king, makes it a little bit more safe in a situation where that matters. And white still has a ton of time. Just on the basis of this time advantage alone, probably white has a great position. Knight d7, not losing any pieces. Advisable. Thank you for the follow. Ik mag dich auch. I know that's not what you said, but, you know. A little trolling never hurt anybody. King G7. This could imply they want to use their rooks in different ways, but it also could be just a prophylactic move, attempting to gain more control of the king side. This pins the G pawn. So while black has a queenside majority, because of all this initiative on the king side, they're never able to utilize that static advantage. Rook h8 confirms that black was attempting to utilize their rooks in a different way, bringing it to the h file. We might see this rook get lifted up and around for defense duty, potentially. Rook f5 is putting pressure on the g pawn, which of course makes sense. That's a weakness. We want to put pressure on the weakness. And now black is in time pressure for like the first time in the game. King g6, defending the g pawn is kind of crazy. If it works, that's pretty nice. Bishop f4 puts more pressure even on g5. f6 supporting g5 is probably necessary, strictly necessary. With just 31 seconds left, it's going to be difficult to maintain this pace of defending the king side. e6 creates threats in different parts of the board. Alright, rook h4 is a quick move. It's probably necessary to, you know, just get it going. But rook h4 is not without consequences. Badswagtime has 2 minutes and 11 seconds to figure out how they want to answer this threat. And it looks like it's not a trivial choice. For Kansaner, we are in the midst of a match. I'm not sure if you were able to catch the description because you're on Twitch. But this is a match between RawrOnion and badswagtime, and you're just in time for the last game. And we're about to start the post-mortem when this game is over, and we'll discuss all the 4 games that they played. Queen f3 is saving the queen, of course. Rook h4 was threatening rook takes g4. But it's also leaving behind the pin and also relinquishing pressure on this rook on h4. So now g4 is played. Queen g3 again. The rook on f5 was hanging, but so is the rook on h4. So let's see if this really solved any problems here for black. They have so little time. So many options, so little time. Rook f1 is just one of several ways that they could attack the king. Now the king's going back to e5. Queen e5 check. King is just running wild here. Knight e5 rescues the king, queen, and rook. We're in pre-moving territory. Pretty solid play here and extreme time pressure from both players. And there's no way that black could respond to rook takes e5 quickly enough. Unfortunately for badswagtime, that was not enough to win the match. But this kind of play, probably if he busted it out earlier, would have at least kept the score level, because this was a very well-matched game. Okay, so let's go to the player chat. Let me see how they're doing. gonna do this one. Hey Shai, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Cool. How's it going?
All right, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Can I get a confirmation for everybody in the chat that they can hear Shai, also known as Bad Swag Time? And we're just waiting for RawrOnion, also known as Ben, to join us here. I'll send him a message. So do you want to give us your impressions of the match so far while we're waiting?
Felt like I had a pretty good position in the first game, and then I had a misclick, which
Oh yeah, that was pretty bad.
tilted me pretty badly into playing.
Yeah, I think probably that was the whole thing that got you in this match, right? Because that was super early on, and by the fourth game, it looked like you recovered.
Play. We played more. Might be different, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a clear win by RawrOnion.
Yeah, it looks like RawrOnion is with us now. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. How's everything going? It's been a while.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, good. So, what are your general impressions about the match before we get into the specific games?
My general impression was I was actually more prepared than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
The opening repertoire I'm using was quite useful.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And in general, swag time or whatever. What should I call him? What should I call you?
Sorry, what do you mean?
What should I call my opponent?
Bad swag time works.
Yeah, bad
swag time. Okay.
Keep the name.
Yeah.
Bad swag time.
Yeah, he just kind of lost control of what was going on. Really.
Yeah, we were just
not to be disrespectful, but it kind of deteriorated.
No, I think it's accurate, even if it's not something somebody wants to hear. But we were just discussing how I think it was the first game he misclicked badly in what was probably close to the position. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So this position, I actually was thinking white is doing well, if you can see it on stream. Because
yeah, let me just get it up.
Mm-hmm. After a few moves, it's like the moves H3 and A3. You know, we can debate their usefulness, but they are extra moves, and the move F6 is probably badly weakening. Like after F5 here.
I mean, my development was quite slow. I didn't play accurately for sure.
Yeah, I think probably just in concept we don't really need to play like Bishop B4. I think usually people are playing something that looks slow for one move, but then all the next moves make sense. Like C6, and then we might see like Bishop D3, Bishop D6, either Knight G2 or Knight F3, one of these, and then there's something very similar for both sides. Like maybe they'll do this.
Yeah, what I haven't quite figured out is like Bishop D6 and the pawns hanging and Knight B5 is possible if you play Bishop D6 straight away.
Right. I think here you can even just take on D5. I haven't thought about this in a serious way. This could be just something silly where they even do this. I don't know, but usually people precede Bishop D6 with Pawn C6, and this is how.
Right. Yeah. But I'm not sure whether my memory is correct on. Oh, isn't that how you do it? Yeah, they're not sure if my memory is correct. But the theory I went through didn't include C6.
What?
Because the idea was to be able to play Knight C6 and put pressure on the D4 pawn.
Right. What were you starting with as your theory base? Like, did you have a book in mind that you were working through?
So I've been using the Chessmood site. They've basically got a whole set for white and black, so it allowed me to be lazy,
It's called Chess
basically.
Moves. The website is Chess Moves, you said?
Chessmood.
Oh, Chess Moves. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What's the name of the guy who's running that again?
Gregorian.
Yeah,
I'm
Gregorian.
not
That's
sure
right.
what
Yeah,
his
yeah, I know.
other name is.
Yeah, I know him as Gregorian. So yeah, I got you. Yeah, I've heard people saying that they like that. So I guess that's a good plug for them. That their opening prep is working well for you.
Yeah, well, it's just a very basic opening prep that I'm on because like I said, I'm really not that familiar. Now I've actually played the match. I can say, like I'm not very clear on the Dutch,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of their lines. I got absolutely thrashed in the Cobb night.
Yeah, it's good to play while you study for things like this, so you can kind of keep an eye on your progress. So for
Yeah,
bad swag time, what was your prep like
Dutch,
for
you have
this?
to be accurate. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have prep. I just
Just played some moves. Yeah, I think this is
yep.
the kind of position where you don't need any real prep. This is one of my issues actually with the chess mood opening. Sometimes it's like it's good in the sense that it's kind of offbeat, but I think someone who's reasonably strong is not going to stray too much in such equal positions. But anyway,
Right, yeah, it's just to get people started with a aggressive setup to learn is my understanding. But yeah, the criticism's fair if you're.
in this position, I think white is much better, as evidenced by knight takes d5. This is just something that if they can play it, it has to be very good. So knight e7 is good. Queen e7 I think is probably the most accurate reply. I liked bishop takes c6. I'm wondering if there's something different here, but I think it has to be this one.
Yeah, I mean, I lost a move with bishop e6 again, which it just kept on losing moves.
Mm-hmm.
Losing tempo, which is not good. But.
So bad swag time. How did you feel about this position?
I mean, I felt like I was slightly superior, but I don't really know how to move forward.
Yeah, you have just one pawn. It's a relatively small advantage, and your deep pawn is kind of weak. But I really liked your position a lot. I thought that you're going to, for example, play like maybe this move. I think your choice of d5 was just something that forced you to play for compensation instead of from a position of strength. That was probably the major detail here.
Yeah, I had some idea. I can't tell you what that idea was now.
Yeah, I understand that.
Earlier wrong.
Yeah, maybe here you could have played a different move actually. Like maybe you go here, hitting the queen and c6. This could be something that you might lose track of in the middle of things.
Yeah, I mean, just when everything reduced down, the move I probably would have found most uncomfortable in that position was b4.
Oh, and instead of this one?
Instead of d5. Because apart from that, I felt like I was still kind of like I had enough control over the position. Yes, there's a decent chance of trading off the bishop pair, but other than that, there's an isolated d pawn which gave me a target and possibly some kingside attack.
I think queen c4 earlier is winning for white, but if we're restricting our analysis just to this situation, then yeah, b4 could be kind of annoying. I think here you would try like bishop a4 to prevent further advance of the pawns, and white just has a lot of space. But a clear winning plan is perhaps lacking. Maybe now you could play something like d5, although I hesitate to suggest it because well, actually here they don't have a useful bishop move. I was thinking maybe that this pawn is getting attacked a lot, and that could be a problem. And maybe it is, even with a weird-looking move like bishop f8. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the thing,
maybe
white really struggles with control of the light squares, and that's probably what black's trying to defend on.
Yeah, I agree. With the extra pawn, though, and the better structure, I think that at some point white will bring this knight to a better square, like maybe c5. And it's just going to be difficult to maintain that defense.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get the rooks in, and they kind of support the d pawn as well, with this sort of pressure, then perhaps that creates a sort of active defense of the d pawn as well.
So let's just fast forward a little bit. I think after losing this d pawn, it was a pretty major situation, like a change in the situation for white, and they were defending really well, like putting the knight on f5, knight g3. I thought here you could cash in with the better structure, but then it's opposite colored bishops, so maybe you're not going to proof an advantage so easily. You know, like if we try something like this, it's just counterplay. But, you know, you improved your rook first, which is sensible. You know, this knight isn't moving. But allowing this exchange of rooks, I think if white doesn't play rook c4, they're probably in a more or less good situation. Like maybe they play g3. I don't know, just for sake of argument. What would you play here, RawrOnion?
Well, not after rook c4, after g3.
Yeah. After c4, we know what to play.
Yeah. My plan was to push the f pawn, so that does put a dampener on that. I'd probably let's see.
Bishop f5 looks pretty reasonable.
I mean, I can attack the b pawn, or I can try and cramp his rook, basically.
Yeah.
But I've got the knight pinned for now, and that's not going to go away too quickly. I could play bishop d5, which would just sort of cramp white's king even more, and that allows me perhaps to play c6 and just sort of control the whole board as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes some sense. It might give white some flexibility to play b4 and, you know, open up some more room for this rook, but this would also give you options to attack this pawn more strongly. So it does seem to be
right. Yeah.
Whatever they choose.
Perhaps I can front it with bishop b3 just to dislodge the rook first.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense too. I imagine that they will have to accept a position where you could force a draw if you want to, and otherwise play actively.
Yeah.
You might have to try some crazy things here. Like, it's unclear to me. But yeah, like,
bishop
black is probably slightly better. So maybe this move should be used more judiciously.
To be clear here, I wanted to play rook c5.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, during the stream, I thought you were going for rook c5.
And that messed with me a lot during this.
Yeah, I could see how that would be irritating. I mouse slip at least like once a day if I'm doing chess stuff. A lot of the time I'm just like analyzing stuff and it's okay, but like I know that if I was playing a game at that moment, I would be pretty unhappy with myself. Yeah, and so I end up studying a lot more than playing because I don't like dealing with that, because that's not a real problem in chess. Yeah, so after rook c5, what would this position end up being like? So rook b5 is kind of on the menu, right? This could be a way to access the back rank.
Yeah, I mean, my natural instinctive reaction is to play c6, just controls the rooks. I wanted to play c6 anyway.
That makes sense.
And also, like the bishop's pinned to the h pawn, so that also allows me just some flexibility and control, really. Again,
White might be obligated to advance these queenside pawns. I'm not entirely sure. They're under attack, so I kind of want to get them going. And I don't see a way to generate that active of a counterplay.
yeah, it's probably what puts the most pressure on me as well.
I just spotted an issue. So you can take this, and my idea was to take back, but now the knight is dead. I think this is going to be like a constant problem for white in like all variations. So maybe...
Just be aware that there's the possibility of rook h7, and if king a6, then you've got a mate on the a-file.
Yeah, that'd be really funny.
I just thought that.
Could be funny. I think that it would be... Hold on. Oops, sorry. Struggling. I think it would be more likely to see this. But then, like, the problems just persist. You know, even if we can take this with check, you know, it doesn't matter. You're not ever getting back to rescue this knight. Playing for compensation, but I find it unlikely with the two bishops that it's going to survive. So it's very difficult to deal with these pawns. Here, I was actually imagining that you would play something like g3 and just like hunker down like this, where at least it takes an extra move to get the rook here. So maybe we could get in king g2. But again, because of the structure, bishop d5 is a constant issue. So maybe black is just better here because of this space on the king side. Like maybe allowing g4, h4 was a problem. For instance, here we might play... Actually, no. It's difficult. I was thinking about knight f5 early in some position, like maybe here. One idea could be to, like, if black is going for this kind of thing, and just take this off. And come what may. But even this could be an issue. Anyway, let's take a look at the next game. I think we should move along there.
Yeah.
Let's see, is this the next one? No, this is the next one. So, so this is an interesting line. Is this the chess mood recommendation for how to play this? With, or I guess I should say, have they addressed the move bishop c5?
Just give me a second to catch up the stream because time.
Sure.
Oh yeah, knight b3. I think that's what they give as the main line. I'm not sure.
Right. Bishop b6 is probably fine. This all looked like normal stuff that I've seen before after queen e2 and castling. Like, all this seems pretty normal. Maybe not worth too much remark. And there was a recurring theme for Shai in this, in this game and in one of the other games where, like, he advances rapidly with the pawns to attack the minor pieces, but then white is not, or whatever color they're playing, like, the person under attack is not obligated to move those pieces because of some pins. So this is a pretty common motif. Now, this position, what do you guys think the evaluation should be? Because, like, so maybe d4 is problematic. For instance, we have this move. And we have this move. But what about one move prior? Could this really be that bad?
I think it's a pretty even game up till then, quite frankly, before d5. But white obviously has quite a good attack.
Yes. I think d5 demands to be played in general, but maybe in this case it's not working. I thought here, after castling, that the move should be something like bishop e6 or queen e7, like maybe with a sacrifice. Obviously they can't take like this. Well, maybe it's not obvious. Actually, it is. This is check, so it would be. But since that's a problem anyway, I'm wondering, like, maybe we could insert this move first and then do something. Like bishop e6. Or maybe, I don't know, I guess if this isn't prep, there's no need to look at it too deeply. This position is sort of tremendous for white after knight d5. I think that rook e6, if you're going to play it, it should be with the idea to take with the pawn and maybe play rook d6, maintaining this pawn on d4. I thought that looked sort of reasonable, but of course there are problems. So let me just check with the engine here real quick. This position says that white is better after knight d5, but it's not by that much. So yeah, here bishop e6, it says, is like just perfectly fine. One thing that I think comes up is that after e5 you can play h6 here, and this is a much more comfortable kind of imbalance for black. There might even
right, yeah. Black has a stake in the center now, which is
yeah, for sure. So I think d5 itself is not a regrettable move. It's something that should be played. It's just that the move d4 was badly timed. But I think Shai's in good company, because when I look at this position, I see Nidich has played this with white and Caruana was against him as black. Sabino Brunello against Jan Christoph Duda here, where d4 was played. Yeah, this position it's something to think about. I don't think it's like a clear mistake to play d4. But anyway, it seemed like it was very what should I say? Uncomfortable with it. Now, this position, I really thought you were going to play h4 almost immediately. Like, none of this prophylaxis, just, open that and try to checkmate them real quick. Did you think about it, RawrOnion?
Yeah, certainly it was something I wanted to do. It just didn't seem like the right time. Okay, yeah, maybe I spent a bit of time messing about, a bit too much time, but
a little bit of playing with your food.
Well, no, it's just trying to get my pieces active, because obviously they're not that well coordinated at all.
Yeah.
And if I'm too slow getting them active, then black actually has quite a crushing attack.
Yeah, it could be. With his pawn on d4, it really restricts your forces. And they also have a5, a4, a3 coming up. So what I kind of thought you might have seen was that there's this way to capture the pawn. But after queen e1, you are solving all of your problems. Maybe maybe just queen e1. I think this is a very good situation. Could be rook e8.
Right, but the rook can also come to the e-file, and black's not obligated to take it on the h pawn. And
yeah, I know this is just a simple line. It's not like.
I didn't really have time to think about it either. So
okay, I gotcha. Yeah. I noticed that your queen visited e2 several times. That was kind of funny. Like, if c4, maybe you shouldn't be so happy with it. Like, what about just queen d2, so you don't have to do so much jogging?
Yeah, definitely queen d2 was what I felt where the queen should have gone to initially. It's just a slight tendency to be too aggressive, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
So,
You just want your queen to be out there somewhere.
Yeah, I want a nice active queen, but yeah.
I guess you have to go back here at this point. You fixed your mistake, but black got a lot of compensation after this little bit of a jaunt with the queen. d3 maybe not my choice, though. I think an interesting option might be c5. Just consolidating this pawn, but also threatening c4.
Definitely, yeah. That's, I mean, Before the queen and the pieces moving around, I was kind of eyeing a4, a5 if I could get it in, but
Like
it's too slow.
back before all this.
Yeah, it was a bit of a pipe dream, really. But
Yeah, this is. I would characterize that as a pipe dream because the real deal is what's going on with this e4 pawn, and you've already blocked your light square bishop. Otherwise, like you might get use of the b5 square, but it's not exactly like that. Okay, let's take a look at the next game, and we're almost done then. So this one was a repeat back to back, which is probably a little bit brutal. Like, I think usually when people are playing a match, they want to alternate colors so they at least have some time to subconsciously think over the first game of that color. But we're using the randomization to pick what color we play for the rapid in blitz. So no such luck. This game was pretty similar. I think that the idea to play knight e7 was good, but maybe not to go to g6. Maybe it's important to immediately break with d5. But, this is all pretty similar to what we've seen already. I'm trying to remember if there's something super important here. Yeah, here it was more or less a one-sided game, probably because black took a very long time to prepare d5, and that allowed you to play f4 and h4 and h5. You just have so many extra pawn moves. Let's look at the last game. I think this one was very interesting because it was your only loss of the match, RawrOnion, and badswagtime played very well here, I thought.
Yeah, I feel like at this point I was very outcome agnostic and just playing.
Yeah, I think it's good to be that way, personally. Berhard, welcome to the chat on YouTube. Yeah, I think h6 and g5 was very, like, what's the word for it? Reckless. So maybe here it's an important moment. White got a very good position without too much effort, like forcing c6. And knight e5 is a thematic play. I think all this is kind of normal. RawrOnion, were you prepared for this?
Not particularly. It's a bit in the grey zone of what I played. Although I think I misjudged. Well, no. The thing is, I can't unpin the queen properly, which is what was bugging me.
Yeah, certainly. I think that you have to play knight bd7 and move the queen, though. Like,
yeah, knight bd7, but if knight bd7, knight takes d7, then he can still double my pawns. That's what was bugging me.
Yeah, that's right. So you could also try to start like this, maybe?
Yeah, I definitely should have played that first. You're right.
Yeah, and now you have the idea of
no, he can still double my pawns. That's something.
Yeah, I think it's still all possible. Like, it's definitely difficult. This is all thematic stuff just for the pawn structure. Like, this symmetrical pawn structure has been studied a lot. Like, it's in Soltis's book called Pawn Structure Chess. I don't think it's the kind of thing that people necessarily prepare that much for. So it's probably a great choice for badswagtime to play this position where it's symmetrical, but white has a small initiative where you can just develop your pieces rapidly and see if they can handle it.
Yeah, and that's why I played the other line by preference, castle and queen side. It just messes up the standard pin the knight and cause issues for a black type of pattern.
Good to pose some specific problems in the opening. Otherwise, what's the point of all that prep? You may as well just play some moves. Okay, so I think that white got a really good position, and the most interesting thing was right at the end with king g6. Badswagtime, let me know how you feel about this position, because I think your position's very good. And RawrOnion, what do you think? What were you thinking at this moment with like 10 seconds left?
I felt mostly like he had 10 seconds left.
Yeah,
I just needed to not get checkmated some.
Yeah, his goal is entirely just to not get checkmated, and you more or less kept things under control, at least for enough time to pull through with a win here. I think there should be a forced win But of course, with not much time, it's hard to sit and find it. Now, badswagtime had 3 minutes and 3 seconds to 36.2 seconds. So he still has to kind of play quickly to utilize that time pressure advantage. But, well, I think for the first several moves, that's exactly what he did. Like putting pressure on g5, hitting this knight and making it go somewhere. This is the part where, with 2 minutes and 28 seconds, I think you could have maybe been a little more precise, but I'm not sure. Maybe I missed something. So what other moves were you guys thinking about here? So Queen f3 was played. Do you think it's worth considering a different move here?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily see a difference that in Queen 3.
I think there is kind of a difference in that after Queen g3, they can take this, and now you're down a rook if you don't do something immediate. So the line that I had calculated while you guys were playing was with Queen d3, and I'm not sure if this is really legit or not. But like if they go here, it becomes the thing that you were probably hoping would happen. And if they play, do they even have another move? Oh yeah, King f4. And here I just saw that there's a multitude of ways to attack the king. My personal preference was this mate in 1. So this seemed like a really critical moment where Queen g3 sets a super difficult kind of trap, but there might also be it also guards this rook that might be useful somehow. Not really with the rook, like, with this being doubled, but like they can't exactly respond like this, I don't think. I don't know, it's super complicated. Here I'd probably play Queen d3, like in time pressure, not thinking too hard. Because now, like, just all the pieces are hanging. It's pretty crazy. But anyway, Queen f3, probably a good choice. G4 makes a lot of sense. Now, at this moment, what about Queen d3? Were you just trying to play fast here, badswagtime, or did you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, just making fast moves.
Fast moves that were slightly difficult to respond to instantly.
Yeah, I think this would have done it too, but Queen g3 also. It's like this move puts a little more pressure on you to actually find it in the first place with 1 minute and 30 seconds left. But this move, it's like you know what's going to happen for like a couple of moves, so you can still think it over a little bit how to complicate the position. But for me as black, I would really like this situation when I have 11 seconds left because I have a very clear plan. I want to run. Got to go fast, you know, just run all the way back. But I think Queen d3 is probably like lights out. What can they do here? Maybe just step back. But then...
I mean, the rook was cutting them off from too easily running to the left there.
Yeah. But when they take the rook, they can do it, right?
1 on e1.
Like, oh, in this situation? Or in a different one?
It was one of the lines you were just showing. Never mind though.
Yeah, the rook is definitely cutting them off. So running back across d6 is difficult. But we probably also have a hard time keeping the attack without... Anyway, I think your decision was probably perfectly good. And king takes f4 is probably something you have to do with 11 seconds left. You know, like if this move doesn't work, nothing does. So just do it. You know, it's like Nike. We just do it. 95 played very quickly was a good move with 0.8 seconds left. I mean, it's just hard to make any moves here. Maybe this would be strong, just to keep things very annoying. I don't know. I think at this point it's sort of beyond analysis, but it's interesting how with more time on the clock, probably black is able to survive somehow. This position with a king on g6. It was pretty tenacious defense. Time was really the undoing here.
I was pretty impressed with his defenses with that tiny amount of time left.
Yeah.
Down to fractions of a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many moves did you play with less than a second left? Alright, this is the first 1, 2, 3. All right, only 3, so not that impressive. Just kidding. I mean, like, just to reach this position without being dead lost in an easy way is pretty great. All right, guys. I think maybe we can wrap up here. This was our last game for the match, and congratulations to RawrOnion, who now qualifies for the Fan Fight Invitational. So maybe you guys will have a rematch, but in a different event.
Well, thanks for the match, badswagtime. It was good to play you anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right.
Let me know if you ever want a casual match sometime.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and for anyone who's watching, if you guys want to join the Discord, you can always like play against and train with other people on our Discord. So if you want the Discord join link, you can always just drop a comment on YouTube. Don't miss the premiere of another lesson with Sam tomorrow. So that will be going on at 2 Central Time. You guys can check that schedule on YouTube. And I'll probably be doing a couple live streams between now and then. So I'll catch you all later. Good luck with your chess.